Chris Cantwell and Angel Unzueta pit Iron Man against the villains behind Source Control as the hero finds himself outgunned by the Mandarin Ring-wearing Cobalt Man. Chris Cantwell rounds out the Source Control story arc with a finale filled with some fun twists and great character work. Again, Cantwell utilizes some of Tony's rogues in some fun and interesting ways, delivering a cool tension-filled battle between Iron Man, War Machine and the villains before upending everything and revealing that Riri Williams was also running the same mission Tony was and was undercover as Cobalt Man to get the rings. I thoroughly enjoyed Tony and Riri's bickering over the Mandarin rings and the concept that Riri wants to use them to do good. It was a great way to also show how very similar they are in characters, where both of them never told each other they were running the same mission because they're very headstrong and kind of have to be the one in charge. And I like that it fits nicely with Tony's entire MO as Iron Man utilizing a great weapon to stop other weapons. The argument also does a great job of showing Tony's need to be in charge, and while he means well, it often comes off as narcissistic and distrustful. I'm hoping Jerry Duggan actually does touch on Riri taking the rings and using them in his upcoming Invincible Iron Man run, since that's not really something you set up and then don't do anything with, and I'm intrigued to see what Riri has in store for those rings and what they can really do in the hands of someone good. Angel Unzueta utilized a much more washed out and darker color palette this issue to help tell the battle Tony has with his villains. I love the inclusion of the stealth suit again, it just looks so damn cool, especially in the rain, and the back half of the issue being all about a verbal argument is kind of hard to pull off visually since it's just people standing around talking, but Angel provided a very nice flow and tension to it. Iron Man issue 24 finished up the Source Control storyline with a surprise twist ending, and one that gave Cantwell and his team final time to do some cool character work with Tony and his friends before the big finale next issue. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10. Iron Man issue 24 finds Tony confronted by Spy Master and Force, who demand he hand over his fancy stealth tech armor and stay down. Tony asks if Cobalt Man is there to rub it in, but the villain says he came by to see Tony's capture was really true. Tony activates his magnetic assembly of the armor, half getting on the armor before Force shocks him, causing Tony's spleen to burst. Tony knows that he's not Bruce or Steve or Thor, he's just a guy from the Upper East Side that's good at racquetball. He knows a ruptured spleen isn't a broken neck or a broken heart or a relapse as he finishes armoring himself up, telling the villains that it seems they don't know him very well since Iron Man never stays down. Force wants first dibs on Tony, who goads the angry man into attacking him. Tony blasts him down, wondering why the man thought he was being owned since this is what they do as heroes and these are the risks they take and he couldn't handle it. Force thinks that Tony used him, but the hero reminds him he partnered with him and this was always the deal. War Machine backs Tony up, blasting down Clayton and allowing Tony to rip his armor off, telling the man that he's not talking about risking their lives but the strain they all undergo in order to do the right thing, and they try not to break things, however they can also hope to repair the broken things when they are done. Tony refuses to say sorry for that anymore, and if Clayton isn't up for that then he can go back to being a piece of shit. Spy Master finds the speech rather moving, hoping Tony has one in store for him, but Tony doesn't think he's worth the effort. Spy Master has Cobalt Man keep his rings on the heroes as Iron Man thinks that this is where both he and War Machine lose. Brody liked what he said about Clayton, backing his friend up, but Cobalt Man doesn't fire on them. Instead he fires at Spy Master and his men, casting them into a dimension of eternal darkness. Cobalt Man assures the heroes that the villains are gone, and it's revealed that Cobalt Man is actually Riri Williams in disguise. Tony asks what she's doing there, learning that she heard of Source Control and that they had the Mandarin rings, so she went undercover to buy them back without firing a shot. Tony thinks that that was dangerous and she could have been killed, but Rhodey reminds him he literally did the exact same thing. Tony knows that she could have come to him for help, but Riri asks if he came to her for help, something Tony knows he didn't do either. Riri reveals her plan would have worked until she heard that he was after the rings too, which meant that he wasn't in a coma like they all thought. Tony thanks her for sticking around and helping them as James asks where Spy Master was sent, since he's never seen the Black Light Ring used like that. Riri says that she used some computer simulations to find the correct amplitude to create an Einstein-Rosen bridge to teleport Spy Master and his men to the Dark Force dimension. She assures them that they weren't disintegrated, as Tony suggests they get out of the rain and talk about how to deal with the dangerous rings. He knows that something smells bad as well, and Riri knows that it's the aerosol particulate residue from the Dark Force dimension, making Tony think that that's gross. Later on in Tony's safe house, he tells Riri that she can't keep the rings, but the woman says she actually can. Tony deals with his ruptured spleen, giving him some pain, making Riri think the rings can wait and they should really get him some help. Tony wants to deal with the rings now. Riri knows that he doesn't trust her with the rings, but Tony does. However, the rings are an insidious thing. She decides to quiz Tony on the rings' quantum interference rate and various other things, which Tony doesn't know. James tries to calm them down, but Tony asks if Riri knows what happens to her mind when she wears them, but she knows that she wore them when she saved his life. Tony tells her that he used all his money to buy up Source Control's weapons, making the woman think that now he just needs a couch to crash on since he's got no money, but Tony tells her that money is transient, while violence and trauma it causes is long-lasting, and Ironheart should know better than anyone about that. He tells her that he wants to dismantle the rings, but Riri thinks that she can use them to do some good, having studied them for years and she just needs to unlock their potential. Tony wants to do it together and collaborate on it with her, but Riri refuses, again asking why Tony doesn't just trust her. Frustrated, Tony says it's because she isn't trusting him. Riri has a right to not, since he's set to destroy the rings, whereas she understands them and respects them and wants to use them. And thanks to Tony's past, he is a bit biased about them. Tony wants to be convinced, but Riri knows that that's a lost cause, citing how Oppenheimer was left to work alone and he built a killing machine, and Tony built a suit without anyone looking over his shoulder, yet for some reason she has to have someone looking over hers now. Tony thinks that the Avengers or Reed Richards would be pounding on his door if he had to use the rings, but Riri isn't so sure about that, knowing that they would trust him vehemently. James asks why she needs to do this in secret though, so Riri tells him that she isn't going to hoard them in the dark alone, only wanting to keep them since she has the vision to see what needs to be done with them. Riri knows that she can save the world with the rings, and after a moment, Tony tells her to take them. Riri wants to update him, but she won't promise him anything. She's surprised that they are in each other's good graces still, and Tony knows it's because for once, they were just their normal, difficult selves. Ironheart soon leaves the safe house as Tony finds himself worried, but it feels like he did the right thing. James wants to fix his spleen now as Tony thinks that it's time they went home to piss off the rest of his friends.